Be Frankie.
Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix.
Yo, what's good? It's your boy B-Dell. If you're new to this channel, hit the like button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. In tonight's transmission, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be talking about how the corporation is transforming into a crypto technocratic control system that's based on globalism, and how the plutocracy is going to perpetuate international collaboration by way of economics and the geopolitical economic reset. Now, everything I'm going to be telling you guys tonight is not based on theoretical or mythological composition. It is based in fact by way of historical timelines that's connected to a seculum of a cycle. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, get those notes out, because this is going to be a masterclass session. And it's going to give you the clarification that you need for this Great Awakening period. And we're going to break it down metaphysically, historically. We finna break it down today. So hit that like, hit that subscribe button, because the basis of this synopsis is going to be breaking down the metaphysics of the 80-year theory and how it coincides with the timeline of eschatology, which is the science of the end times for those who don't know that. Now, the 80-year theory is connected to a seculum of a cycle, meaning that there's a fourth turning that's connected to the biological clock of humans on the planet, which is a lifespan of 80 years. Now, after every 80 years, there's a crisis that ensues for a global turning point. And that turning point is activated by way of a reset or some type of calamity. So this transitional shift takes place by way of a high, an awakening, unraveling. Then you have a crisis. So we're due for a big time cataclysmic event. We don't know if it's going to be the big one. We don't know if it's going to be a electromagnetic post efficiency. We don't know if it's going to be 10 days of darkness, World War III, or Civil War. There's a multitude of things that you could be looking at when it comes to this reset system, right? Because we're due for a crisis. Because the last crisis that we had was in 1945 when you had World War II, right? And then 80 years before that, you had the Civil War. And 80 years before that, you had the Northwest Indian War, where they was ending the Confederacy. And then during that process, that's when they activated the establishment of the United States currency, or the dollar, right? So all these is basically transitional shifts that manipulates the economic infrastructure. It manipulates the timeline of, historical events on the planet. And it's connected to certain points of the sun cycle, right? So by way of this theory, that basically denotes the fact that something's going to be taking place, something is going to happen. We don't know if it's going to be happening by way of 2025, which is the year of the snake year, which is the 9-year, or it's going to happen in between, 2026, 27, leading up to 2028. Because when we were talking about the big one in one of my transmissions about 12 days ago, I was breaking down how, the fall of the church, the Vatican popes of Rome, basically symbolizes the fall of patriarchy, and patriarchy is built on top of nature. So that means that nature has to be activated to create a cataclysmic event, which is basically the embodiment of the crisis that's connected to the 80-year theory, right? So that's how I know that I'm basically on point with my message. Because, the synchronicities is syncing up. The receipts is receipting. Everything I've been telling you guys is basically in alignment with the timeline of everything that's taking place in the Great Awakening period, right? So after every 80 years, there's always a crisis, and we due for a crisis. We're due for a Black Swan event. That's why the World Economic Forum, they said that it's inevitable that something diabolical is going to be taking place on American soil, right? Which is why Donald Trump wants to put a golden dome over the planet, but they're doing that by way of the Hegelian dialectic principle. Problem, reaction, solution. The problem is to pretend that we have a threat. The reaction is to put a golden dome over the planet. And the solution is a diabolical solution that actually goes against the energies of humanity. Because when you put another dome over the planet, that's going to basically block out the transmission of the sun to give us those upgrades, right? So everything that they're doing as far as like the Hegelian dialectic process, they're creating mechanisms to destabilize the awakening process on the planet. That's all that they're basically doing. Now, I'm going to show you guys a video for a second, because this coincides with everything I'm talking about, the 80-year cycle block theory, the 80-year theory. The 80-year theory denotes the fact that every 80 years, there's a seculum of a cycle or fourth turning that takes place that's based on historical timelines that operates by way of the frequencies of the sun when you're talking about solar cycle 25 or when the sun is at solar maximum. Anytime the sun is at solar maximum, that manipulates physical reality to where you have a crisis, economic crash, a multitude of afflictions that can take place on the planet, not just on the geographical areas of America. It can happen on a global standpoint. So I'm going to show you this video. It's connected to a movie. So I'm going to show you this video for a second, and then we're going to get on with the presentation and the transmission at hand. So if you're new to the channel, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that share button, get the likes up, because this is a very important video. And the video, everything I'm going to be showing you guys tonight is going to put everything in perspective. All right, here we go. Now, this movie is called The Watcher on Netflix. I don't know if it's still on Netflix, but there's a scene in this TV series where he basically breaks down the fourth turning process on how the system operates in the seculum of a cycle. That's why I keep telling you guys, you got to watch movies, you got to watch TV shows, not for no damn entertainment, but to get the edification that you need, because they put all the information in the form of entertainment in the movies, because the perception of art imitates reality. Because they know that if they put it in the movies, it's going to transduce into the reality. That's another form of technological dark black magic, a form of synthetic manifestation, to where they operate under the threefold law. They telling you the truth the whole time, but they pass it off as entertainment. So that's why it's imperative to watch these damn movies. You got to watch the movies, old movies, watch 80s movies, scary movies and stuff like that. All the messages is in the movies, right? So I'm going to show you this scene from the TV series called The Watcher. And he talks about everything I was talking about in the beginning of the video.
It's the fourth turning. Record historical events. They don't just happen. They're set into motion by great men, generation.
So I got it sped up so he get hit with copyright and stuff like that. So he was saying, he said that generational crises happen every fourth turning. And there's captions at the bottom if you can't understand what he's saying. I'm going to play it twice.
Record historical events. They don't just happen. They're set into motion by great men, generational personae. And each one of these unleashes a turning that lasts about 20 years, more or less. And every four turnings is a seculum, which is about the length of a human life. And at the end of each, there's a crisis. In this country, the crisis is always war. Revolution, 80 years later, Civil War. 80 years later, World War II. And that's coming up on 80 years now, so something's about to happen.
They put it in the movies. I'm going to play it back. He tells you that something is about to happen. You can't make this up, ladies and gentlemen. And this TV series came out in the year of 2023, I believe. And it's talking about a tunnel system under a specific house. And they've been putting out all these documentation talking about you got underground tunnel systems in underground cities where they spent $21 trillion to basically, salvage for the doomsday prophecy. So I'm going to play it over again for you guys if you didn't understand what he was saying.
It's the fourth turning. Record Historical events, they don't just happen. They're set into motion by great men, generational personae. And each one of these unleashes a turning that lasts about 20 years, more or less. And every 4 turnings is a seculum, which is about the length of a human life. And at the end of each, there's a crisis. In this country, the crisis is always war. Revolution, 80 years later, Civil War. 80 years later, World War II. And that's coming up on 80 years now, so something's about to happen.
Make this up, ladies and gentlemen. You can't
It's the
make
4th
this
turn.
up. You cannot make this up, ladies and gentlemen. Hit that like button, hit that share button, hit that subscribe button. Because this is a very important video. This is an important video that everybody needs to watch and get the edification out there. Because, you know, now one of my followers on Instagram, they sent me this. Now I was telling you about, in one of my transmissions, I was telling you guys about the big one. The big one is basically equated to the earthquake. When you're talking about the activation of the Cascadian subduction zone, that will basically create sedimentary rock formation by way of the liquidation of the polar ice caps, to where it causes the shift to where you have a magnetic pole shift, right? To where you have a shifting of land masses. So now there's a publication that's going around. It talks about the critical volcano alert. The Axel Seamount, a massive underwater volcano located 300 miles off the Oregon coast, is now showing unmistakable signs that an eruption is near. We covered this months ago. Since then, things have gotten worse. The seafloor is inflated to the same level as it reached before in 2015. Before the 2015 eruption, hundreds of earthquakes are hitting in the area daily, and that number is rising. Scientists say it could erupt at any time. This means tomorrow is on the table. If it blows up, it could trigger over 10,000 earthquakes in a single day. You can't make this up. It's something, you know what I'm saying? The synchronicities is syncing up. For some reason, every time I put out a video, days later or a week later, 2 weeks later, whatever's taking place on the planet is in alignment with the video that I put out. You can't make this up. For everybody who's been watching me, y'all already know this. Y'all already know I was on point about the planes. I was on point about the Pope. We're going to get into the Pope stuff, right? And I'm on point about the earthquakes, right? Because the activation of the earthquakes symbolizes the fall of patriarchy. The fall of patriarchy is the fall of mankind, because mankind is a kind of a man that was genetically spliced. So that means that you have a synthetic demographic of people running a synthetic system. So that's why the fall of the church is the embodiment of the fall of patriarchy. The fall of patriarchy is the embodiment of moonfall, because the moon is what controls the material world, and the material world must be destroyed by way of the activation of nature when you're talking about the Fibonacci sequence. And when the Fibonacci sequence harmonizes with the Schumann resonance, it causes sedimentary rock formation, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and things of that nature. That's what's going on right now on this planet. Everything that you're seeing right now is basically the embodiment of the matriarch taking over the patriarch on a physical level and at a spiritual level, right? Because these energies is coming in, they're being streamed down from the mental plane. The mental plane is the magnetosphere, right? And the magnetosphere speeds up the vibration of the planet in the magnetism. And the magnetism is where you get your magic. So this is why Donald Trump wants to put a golden dome over the planet. He wants to put a golden dome over the planet because he wants to block out that transmission, because he knows that the ones who have the carbon coding and the neuromelanin can activate the Christ consciousness. So he wants to stop the transmission, right? That's what this is all about, right? Because they know we're at the apex of the seculum of a cycle that's connected to solar cycle 25. These new energies from the sun is starting to shake shit up now, right? A lot of y'all been getting headaches, body aches, and things of that nature, right? Everything is basically speeding up in vibration. So that basically means that you're supposed to be fasting during that process when you got these energies coming in and spiking up the Schumann resonance. Because I told you before, the Schumann resonance, when it's at its highest frequency, it goes from 7.83 megahertz frequency to 13.13 megahertz frequency. That's the queen mother seed of the activation of Mother Nature and the matriarch, right? So it says it can activate and trigger Over 10,000 earthquakes in a single day. Lava flows during the last eruption reached 450 feet thick. This volcano is buried deep under the Pacific, so coastal communities are not in direct dangers, but the geological activity is intense. The warning signs are here, right? So we're in that time period. I told you the activation of the New Madrid fault line, right? Because the blackout in Europe canceled the Madrid opening. So all these rituals going on is basically lining up to the big one. The big one is basically talking about the earthquake. The earthquake is connected to the volcanic eruptions that's going to be taking place in the sea that can activate over 10,000 earthquakes. Not a coincidence. Hello. The information is out there. The synchronicity is syncing up, right? So that's why I put out this video called The Big One. Now it begins. Because like I said, the fall of the church is the fall of patriarchy. The fall of patriarchy is the fall of the material world. Because when the Pope was unalive and when the Queen was unalive, that was the two dualistic pillars that controls the three city states. So that's basically the epitome of the fall of America, which is modern day Babylon. Or when you're talking about the Assyrian Empire, right? That's why when you go to Jonah chapter 3, verse 5, it says that Nineveh shall be overthrown. Nineveh is another title for America. America is Mystery Babylon, right? It's the baby lion because it's connected to those factions over in the United Kingdom, right? So their system is falling. So this is why you got to read this book called The Fourth Turning is Here by Neil Howe, right? So you had many different forms of, fourth turnings. You had the Revolutionary War that basically was in alignment with the United States Constitution being approved. And then after that, you had the Whiskey Rebellion, and that led up to the Compromise, the Civil War, and the 15th Amendment was ratified. And then you had Black Tuesday, and then you had the gold confiscation during that process, because that's when they transmuted the stock exchange to where you have humanoid real estate because the money is not being backed by a natural resource no more. So then that's what led up to World War II, and that started NATO, and then that led into a financial crisis in 2008. We all remember that when all the houses foreclosed, right? And now we're on the brink of a future American war in between the years of 2023 up until the year of 2028. And we already know what they're doing with the year of 2030 when you're talking about the sustainable development goals, right? That works in tandem with the smart cities, right? Because they want to turn it into a form of technocratic sorcery, technocratic control under a police state that is operated by way of the military that's being controlled by FEMA, right? So, like I said, you have a high and awakening, then you have an unraveling, then you have a crisis. A crisis is where you either have an economic depression or some type of war that's going to transduce the shifting process when you're talking about the ending of a certain system. Now, 1865 was a very pivotal year in American history, marking the end of a civil war. Then I was also during the time period of, when Lincoln was unalived, right? And then you had the beginning of Reconstruction. So this is every time you have a fourth turning, every 80 years, something bad happens. And we're on the brink of that, that timeline of that prophecy by way of, cycles and things of that nature. We're on that timeline. We're on that frequency right now. So something has got to happen in order to activate this reset, right? So matter of fact, I got a video to show you guys talking about that volcano. Because like I said, the shifting process doesn't have to denote the fact that it has to be subjected to a blackout. It doesn't mean that it has to be subjected to a big earthquake or some type of civil war. There's a multitude of things that can take place in this last turning that we in the crisis. We're in the age of the crisis, right? The illusion has to be destroyed. So the volcano, the underwater volcano in the actual seamount on the coast of Oregon can activate 10,000 earthquakes, right? And that's on the West Coast. And I'm gonna show you guys this video for a second. Now, here we go. All right, here we go, ladies and gentlemen.
An underwater volcano located about 300 miles off the Oregon coast is showing signs that it may erupt later this year. Recent studies have revealed increased seismic activity and noticeable swelling at axial seamount, a massive submarine volcano scientists have monitored for decades.
So we are in that time period, ladies and gentlemen. We already know that something is taking place, is brewing up to something, right? Because in order for them to create this synthetic golden age, they got to create calamity. They got to cause chaos, because Donald Trump, he's the chaos card. He's a chaos agent, right? He's the one that's going to create the tower moment on American soil, right? Him and Elon Musk. So that's why I put out this video 12 days ago called The Big One, right? Now it begins. Because the beginning, the shifting process when you had the fall of the church, right? Because one thing you got to understand, the fall of the Vatican is basically denoting the fact that there's going to be a form of an economic crash that's going to be taking place. Because the Vatican, they control they hold the titles to everybody's birth certificates, right? That means that they own your life. They own your life, basically, right? We're going to get into that later. Now, we're on the brink of another war, right? You got all this stuff, especially, you know, with everything that's taking place with Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, right? Because what he's basically doing is basically eradicating Western control, right? To where he has an autonomous civilization that's based on sovereignty without Westernized control. So one thing you also got to understand is that there's 14 nations in Africa that is operated by way of the CFA franc, which is the French currency, right? And in order to destabilize this whole mythology of the New World Order system, they have to basically detach themselves from the colonialism. They have to detach themselves from the economic, you know, infrastructure that's connected to these Western civilizations. So that's why he's a problem, because he's not conforming to the New World Order system, right? Which is why they had to get the Gaddafi out of here, right? And I believe during that time period, that's when you had an economic crash, because he was creating his own currency, right? I think his currency was backed by gold or whatever, right? So the same thing is actually taking place right here in real time. So, you know, a lot of things you got to understand that it's not about, you know, Africa. It's not just simultaneously just about Africa. It's about a shift in power, right? And they want that autonomy over everybody on an international level. So the New World Order is basically saying, like, get down and lay down, or we're coming to take you out. We're going to send people like Michael Langley to you, right? It's one of those things. They going from different continents and nations and different tribes and stuff by way of, you know, international control. And he's not conforming to it. So salute to this man, salute to this brother right here, you know what I'm saying, for standing up for his country. Because, you know, when you have a multitude of African leaders who are basically eradicating and eliminating the jurisdiction of Westernized control, that's going to plummet the stock exchange over in the Americas, which is going to cause a fall in the corporation. The corporation already failed. It's just the fact that, you know, we still going to work. Every time you clock in per diem, that's getting sent to Wall Street, right? Somebody's getting paid. Somebody's making money off your life. Like I said, this is all connected to the Vatican, because the Vatican holds the title to your birth certificates, right? And your birth certificate is the routing number when you put another zero behind it, right? These are all bank numbers that's connected to their corporations. So that means that the system is falling. They're supposed to be giving you all your damn money back, right? So the stock market crash, Yeah, stock market crash worse than 2008. Crisis is coming in 2025, warns top economists, right? That's because you got all this going on, right? You got all this stuff going on. Now, and then when you have the fall of an economic system, 9 times out of 10, what happens is you have a war. A war is basically another way to compensate for the lack thereof on the economic level, right? So when you go to the 4th book of Ezra, it talks about, behold, a terrifying sight appearing from the east, East America, the nations of the dragons, which is China and Russia, because they are allies, right? And the Arabia shall come with many chariots, which is machines of war. Or you could talk about Vimanas or extraterrestrial interdimensional UFOs. And from that day set out, their hissing shall spread over earth. When you're talking about draconian reptilians, or you could talking about the sound of a bomb, right? Because I did put out the video talking about the smorgasbord, right? The smorgasbord was talking about the activation of the final sacrifice, where you have these Nephilim or the Nephilah, right? Or the archonic forces come from the abyss, and they come on top of the surface of the planet and feed on humanity in the form of a final sacrifice, when you have the elite hide underground in these bunker systems. That's a whole different transmission in itself, right? Because I already broke that down when you were talking about Nightmare Hall. So you also have the Carmenians. The Carmonians, who are the Iranians, raging in wrath, shall go forth like boars of the forest. And with the great power, they shall come and engage in them, which is America, in battle, and shall destroy, devastate a portion of the land of the Assyrians, which is America. Jonah chapter 3, verse 5. Nineveh shall be overthrown, which is America, right? Because America is being judged by way of the solar eclipses that took place from the years of 2017 to the years of 2024. With their teeth, weapons of war, and then the dragons, China and Russia and its allies, remembering their origin, shall become stronger and combine in a great power and turn to pursue them, basically going against America. And then shall be a disorganized conflict of a civil war, and silenced by the power, and shall turn and flee. And from the land of the Assyrians, which is Americans, an enemy hiding in America in ambush shall reset them and destroy them in fear of trembling, come down to their army, which is civil confliction. And Americans, politicians, and military leaders also, fall along with the corporation. So all this stuff is, when you understand the historical timeline, this is why I tell people all the time, especially if you stuck in religion. You don't understand the damn religion if you don't understand historical context. So if you don't understand historical context, you don't understand the religion. You can't have one without the other, right? So in order to get clarification about everything that's taking place on the timeline, as when you're talking about old history and old biblical context, you got to understand how it applies, with present day time, basically, right? You got to understand how they basically work in synergy. So you can't just be so much of a Bible thumper that you negate history. So if you don't understand history, you don't understand the Bible. And if you don't understand the Bible, that means you don't understand history. Now, I got another video to show you guys, because I got a lot of receipts for this video. Now, this is going to be talking about the New World Order. All the stuff that I was talking about. All right, here we go. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you guys can be notified, right? So I'm going to play this video for you guys.
Display today what Moscow considers a new world order.
Today we're seeing a new, more just world order take shape. And the meaning behind the United Nations is important as ever. We must strengthen its coordinating role, making it central in global affairs, achieving and maintaining the principles and standards enshrined in its UN Charter, in all their interrelatedness.
But it's, the world order is changing. Putin is on the back foot at the moment. We should be under no illusion about that. And it wouldn't surprise me if he had his fingers in the pie and was helping to stir India and Pakistan, because if he can get anything to take the world's eyes away from what's going on inside Ukraine, he will try that. And this is something that we have to be careful of. Middle East next.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you're right, actually. And just looking at Sudan and how that's a proxy war with various entities stirring things up and selling weaponry. We live in dangerous times, that's for sure. Philip Ingram, thank you ever so much. I'll get your thoughts on this very quickly before we go to break. I don't know where you were at on your geopolitics, but one thing that is clear to me, you've got the Crinklies, as they're called, which is basically the BRICS group of nations enhanced, which is China, Russia, India, North Korea. Well, no more like China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and India sort of plays both sides. I never understand how Iran fits in.
Now remember, when you understand historical context and bloodlines, the Iranians are Carmonians. Carmonians are with the dragon. The dragon is China and Russia, right? You got to understand, you got to think.
To all of this, because Russia has its own issue with Islamism.
It does.
And then Iran's there sort of stirring the pot.
It's about being the disruptor, isn't it?
That's the schism, I think, that we need to make happen, sort of break up the cozy relationship between Russia and Iran, make them realise that they actually hate each other. Yeah, I mean, it's very obvious, isn't it? We live in an increasingly unstable world, and it's quite clear we live in a world with a sort of, this parade in Moscow, having sort of joint forces saying, look, if we get together, the world's in peril.
Yeah, well, yes, and this is where the Victory in Europe Day parade in Moscow was very interesting. You got all of those despot leaders coming together. The Xi Jinping, leader of China, and Vladimir Putin was probably the most important that was there. But again, Putin was putting on a big display. This is the first time in a number of years that we've seen as many armoured vehicles on display, and then aircraft flown. I'm surprised the Russians still have so many aircraft and so many armored vehicles.
In an annual parade that filled Red Square with military hardware and dozens of foreign leaders, Vladimir Putin once again tied Russia's past triumphs to today's war in Ukraine, and he also further tied Russia's fate to that of China. Here's Nick Schifrin.
In Moscow today, pomp, pageantry, patriotism, a show of force, from the intercontinental missile carriers of the Cold War to the drones of the Ukraine war. Vladimir Putin's Russia ties what many Russians consider their finest moment, victory over Germany, to today's confrontation with the West. And on display today, what Moscow considers a new world order, an alliance of autocracies led by the leaders of China and Russia, with the help of North Korea, and nearly 30 visiting leaders to help Putin weaponize the past to justify the present.
This is why I'm saying the synchronicities are syncing up, because everything that I showed you in that biblical context in the fourth book of Ezra is in alignment with everything that's being displayed on the news in real time. You can't make this up, ladies and gentlemen.
Russia has been and will continue to be an indestructible wall against Nazism, Russophobia, and anti-Semitism. Truth and justice are on our side. Our whole country, society, and people support the participants of the special military operation.
But left unsaid today, Russia's vulnerabilities to the war in Ukraine. The internet here was jammed, and the stage where dignitaries sat reportedly fitted with a roof to stop drones. Yesterday, Putin and Xi Jinping further cemented what they call their no-limits partnership. They released a joint statement pledging to, quote, decisively counter Washington's dual containment of Russia and China, and demanding a Ukraine settlement, quote, eliminate its root causes, which they mutually defined as Western alliances.
In the face of the countercurrent of unilateralism and the active power politics and bullying in the world, China will join Russia in shouldering a special responsibility and promote an equal and orderly multipolar world.
All right, since we got that video out the way. So the receipts are receipting, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to bring them damn receipts every time. because that's how you give people clarity. Because, you know, some people are visual learners. They got to see it in order to understand it intuitively. So, you know, all this could also be the inception of an affliction process when you're talking about, you know, us getting infiltrated, you know, when you're talking about, you know, Ukraine. Trump cuts ties with Netanyahu amid deepening rift over Middle East strategy, right? Because that's basically a war within a war, within the political apparatus, right? When you're talking about the deep state versus the Republicans, right? The white hats versus the black hats. That's what you're seeing taking place right now. Not just on an autonomous scale. You're looking at it from an international standpoint too. You got white hats and black hats, right? It goes deep. Now, this tweet's been going around, and they're talking about underground facilities, right? So, former Bush administration office Catherine Austin Fitts revealed to Tucker Carlson that the United States government has constructed underground bases as large as entire cities. According to Fitts, some of these massive underground structures are officially documented, while others remain hidden, and they are limited to the United States, but are scattered across the globe. She theorized that there could be as many as 170 underground bases, some located beneath the ocean and others around the United States, interconnected by secret transportation networks. Fitts suggested that these extensive underground facilities may have been built in preparation for a potential near extinction level event. That's why I said we're at the apex of a seculum of a cycle. Every 80 years, there's a crisis that takes place. Could it be the big one? Could it be an EMP? Could it be, you know, the activation of the coronal mass ejections hitting the planet and it shuts down the power grid? Could it be some type of civil war on American soil? Could it be some type of race war with all this stuff going on in the media about, you know, so-called white and black people, right? There's a multitude of things that can happen, right? And just from my perspective, I'm gonna do a video on it. I have no facts to back it. This is just my own download. But I believe that AI is going to be the catalyst to shut down the grid, right? And I'm going to explain that at the end of the video. So stick around for the end of the video. And I also got some announcements to make at the end of the video also, if you want to stick around. Some important announcements. Now, so Fitz suggested that an extensive underground facilities may have built in preparation for a potential near extinction level event. Now, I'll tell you one thing. I'm not spending $21 trillion on potential anything. So the only reason they spending that amount of money because they know the shit is going to happen, right? Because what's the purpose of even doing that, right? $21 trillion, right? And I'm going to play the video that's connected to what everything is talking about. Because like I said, this is the lady right here. Ex-Bush official claims 21 trillion spent on underground doomsday base for the elite, right? There's a video connected to this, right? So this is all connected to the Arctic Treaty, right? Where they got these underground bunker systems, the Global Sea Vault in Antarctica. Because the Arctic Treaty, the Antarctic Treaty system is basically an international covenant made with all the world powers. So when you have this global event taking place, they have a place to go underground in these underground cities. The Arctic Treaty is related in agreements collectively known as the Arctic Treaty System, regulate international relations with respect to Antarctica's Earth's only continent without a native human population, right? And this is what, you know, they got different, you know, preservatives and underground botanicals, you know, guards and stuff like that. You know, then you got CIA documentation that just came out, and it talks about the description of ET bases, right? It talks about how you have a Titan base, then you got Mount Hayes, and Mount Hayes is connected to the underground networks that's connected to these tunnel systems of Antarctica. And it's connected to these tunnel systems that the ex-Bush administration official was talking about, right? So now I'm gonna play the video so you guys can get some clarity on everything. That's what this is all about. We're here to get clarity about what's going on. We're here to give clarity for those who are stuck in the darkness. We're here to give clarity to family members who won't get their head out their ass because they still stuck in religion. That's what these videos are for. These videos is just meant to wake people up and see, and to help them see the bigger picture. But in order for them to see the bigger picture, you got to show them pictures, right? That's a part of the process. Because everybody that just don't want to sit here and hear me talk, they got to see stuff. They got to read certain stuff. They got to watch certain videos. So here's the video right here.
But there is a history of near extinction events. And one of the things that I've looked at, because I'm trying to figure out, between fiscal 1998 and fiscal 2015, there were 21 trillion of undocumentable adjustments in the U.S. government. If you go to our website, missingmoney.solera.com, we have years and years of documentation, including the government financials that show this. And so the question is, where's all this money going? And one of the things I've looked at in the process of looking at where all this money is going is the underground base and city infrastructure and transportation system that's been built. And
I'm sorry?
Yes. So we have built an extraordinary number of underground bases and supposedly transportation systems. Some of these are some of these are documented as part of the national security infrastructure. I think there are many more. So,
in the United States?
In the United States, on all over the world. But, from 2021 to 2023, I took one of the smartest subscribers in the Solera Report network, and he and I spent 2 years collecting all the data and all the allegations on underground bases. And then we systematically went through and tried to estimate our guess. This is totally a guess of how many underground bases, both underground in the United States, but also underground under the ocean around the United States. And our estimate was 170 with a transportation network connecting them.
And what would be the...
So you mean to tell me they doing that shit for no reason? They just building that, right? Because I told you, they got cryptids in Nightmare Hall that's connected to these deep underground military bunker systems that's being controlled by United Nations military, right? So they got all they got to do is hit that button, and hit that button, these cryptids come up to the surface and they feed on humanity. These are what you call the Archon or the Nephilim, the cherubim of the Bible, who's stuck in the bottomless pit. This is what it's all alluding to, right? These underground bunker systems. They showed you in the Leave the World Behind and how they built bunker systems, right? Not a coincidence. The perception of art imitates reality every damn time.
Purpose?
The purpose, if you thought you were going to get a near extinction event, so there, to me, there are two purposes. You have so many activities going on that you need to keep secret, that you're basically building the capacity to, for example, if you're doing a secret space program, you need to platform it from, things that can't be seen. But I think if you're worried about a near extinction event, that's...
So I know nothing about this other than my only window into it. I knew a contractor who worked on one in Washington, in the city of Washington, D.C. Right. And I remember him telling me about a power box, like a transformer box on Constitution Avenue that he told me, because he worked on it personally, was actually the exit, the egress from the White House. That was kind of by vehicle. I thought that was, I was like, really? He goes, oh yeah, no, I installed it. I know. And I thought, well, that's kind of crazy that in the middle of this big city where I was on Constitution Avenue every day, that you could build something like that without me knowing it. Under the VP's house at the Naval Observatory, same thing. I think most people know that. Next to my brother's house on Macomb Street in D.C. But that's, I always thought that was like preparation for nuclear war. Like, I didn't really.
Now, remember, he said something about D.C. So you have, catacombs and labyrinths underneath, the bottom of these political and government buildings in Washington, D.C. There's a tunnel system under there that leads all the way to Antarctica, Mount Shasta, and things of that nature. There's a big underground network. That's why it's imperative to study and investigate in your city. How you know that your city is not a hub for trafficking and not a hub for, tunnel systems, right? In my city, we have an underground network. It's called the Catacombs, right? And one thing that I did notice that every Democratic president that we ever had, they always came to visit my city, right? And you have an underground network here, right? Not a coincidence, because we all know what the left do in order to get, to balance out their karma in the form of sacrifice, because they worship the god of Moloch. And we all know what takes place underground, right? So I'm gonna keep playing the video.
I think about it that
some
much.
of it is, yeah, it's preparation for catastrophe.
So, but you think that there are facilities like that in other places outside DC?
Oh, yeah. So if you're interested, we have a great interview. I did an interview of Richard Dolan on underground bases on the Solari Report, and it's sort of an introduction to the topic, and it's based on a lot of the research of a guy named Richard Sauter, who is very hard to interview. So Richard kind of went through all the material, and clearly it's, I don't know if you ever saw, Washington Post did a project. It was in 2010 or 12 called Top Secret America. And one of the reporters, it was a team of 2 reporters, one of them put together a database of all the different top secret installations that had been built in the country, including since the Patriot Act. And what you saw was just this explosion of money in building so many both underground and above ground facilities. But there is a history of near extinction events.
So now what you got to understand is that you see that she was doing this dialogue with Tucker Carlson, right? Tucker Carlson is a part of a secret society called the Pilgrim Society, right? Tucker Carlson is a part of a secret society called the Pilgrim Society. And they are the ones who wrote the Doomsday and the End of the World Manifesto that's connected to these underground bunker systems. So it's not a coincidence that all his platforms and all his, presentations and all his TV shows and everything, he's always talking about end time events, right? That's because he comes from this. You see his name right here, Tucker Carlson, connected to the Pilgrim Society, right? The perception of art imitates reality. They got to give you the truth. So that's why they use him as a catalyst to push the narrative. And now remember, he said that there's underground labyrinths and tunnel systems in DC. Now there's a video connected to this, because these underground tunnel systems that the lady was talking about, when you have a mass extinction level event that's taking place, these lead all the way to Antarctica, Mount Shasta, all over the place, right? So now I'm gonna show you a video that's connected to these tunnel systems. And then I'm gonna show you another one that's showing you a trucking service going through these tunnel systems. Hold on for a second. All right. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. If you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. Don't be a monitoring spirit. So here's the video right here. This is a congressman who's opening up, underground tunnel systems inside these government buildings in Washington, D.C.
So this is one of the neat things about the U.S. Capitol. Of course, this building, construction started in the 1700s. And there are all sorts of little hidden passageways. You saw I just pulled this cover up. Yeah. And you can see, if we get the camera to come over, don't fall in. We don't need a workers' comp claim today.
Oh, but I thought it was a conspiracy, right? Everything is a conspiracy until people start showing receipts, right? Conspiracy theorists are up 21-0. Everybody that was being given resistance to the Great Awakening period, you know what I'm saying? Y'all, the problem, my problem with y'all is that y'all have emotional rebuttals. You're not operating from a place of logic. You got to ask yourself, how does 800,000 people come up missing on time every time on the planet? That's because it's being done at the highest level of government. And these government buildings that's connected to the political apparatus, they have tunnel systems. And these tunnel systems lead to other cities, right? They lead to other military bases, ET bases, right? Not a coincidence.
But you can see there's a passageway. These were long stairs that used to be here that were closed off. We're just off of what's called Statuary Hall, which at one time was the actual House chamber. So, and it's outside there. But this is just an example of some of the little hidden secrets of the Capitol.
Man, right in your face. Right in your damn face. As a matter of fact, while we at it, I'm going to show you another video, right? You know what? I got to show you the pictures first just to give you more clarity. And then we're going to operate and activate these videos, right? So you got underground networks in these government buildings, right? They even got their own school system, right? They got, you know what I'm saying, the bus picking up children in these underground tunnel systems, right? They're prepared for something to happen. So how you know that all these, you know, these little people that's connected to CPS and stuff like that, how you know they're not taking those children, they put them underground in these underground networks, right? To preserve, you know what I'm saying, a certain genetic format in a form of genetical self-preservation. Because they know that, you know, when you have these calamities, there's going to be certain bloodlines that's not going to be able to live out the Great Awakening period. And I'm pretty sure there's a, you know, but, you know, one thing you got to understand about, there's a layering in a hierarchical system when it comes to, you know, these underground bases and underground tunnel systems. Because Hollow Earth is real, but Hollow Earth is not connected to these underground cities. You got to go a little deeper than that, right? Just like you got the atmosphere, the stratosphere, the exosphere, thermosphere, magnetosphere is layered off. So you got 7 layers and 7 planes of existence inside the planet also, right? Because the planet is actually a shapeshifter. It's not flat, nor is it round. The planet is a shapeshifter, because what basically denotes the fact that the planet is a shapeshifter is that it's being controlled by archons who are shapeshifters. So it can be the planet can be the personification of a cube, and it can transduce into a circle or a globe structure, right? It can shapeshift, because a square and a circle is able to live on 2 different dimensional planes because they both equate to 360 degrees. So the planet, in my opinion, I think is a shapeshifter. I don't have the evidence to back that, but one day I will. So stay in tune with that. So they got their own network. They got trucking systems, right? And now I'm going to show you a video of a truck driver. And I remember looking at this video one time. It was a truck driver. He went inside these underground caverns, and he said that he's seen mega structures of Olmec heads inside these caves and inside these mountains. And they was plastering it off with fake rocks, right? They was trying to hide it. I was looking for the video, but I can't find it. I was looking for the video to incorporate it with the presentation, but if I find it, I'll present it one day again. So we're going to go to this video talking about this other truck driver who's demonstrating what takes place in these underground city systems that they got.
Yeah. Goes all the way to Washington, D.C., huh? Goes all the way to Washington, D.C. Yeah, you Homeland Security? Yeah. How far have you taken this down to, how far have you actually ran a load? 100 miles? Up to Maine? No shit. How many miles do you think that is? Man, that's unbelievable. Not to mention, I heard there's one that goes all the way to Colorado, right? Unbelievable. What do you think you're hauling? Any idea?
Crap.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Crap makes all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
You don't really know.
Yeah. I know there's been a lot of military stuff being hauled around lately, that's for sure, huh?
Yeah, we deliver to military.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah. 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 Well, I appreciate it. I heard there's water supply, food supply, everything's in there. Yeah, unbelievable.
You don't get no cell phone service.
No. Peace, brother. I mean, basically, you got an underground roadway system here that runs all the way to Maine, to Washington, D.C., to Colorado. It's fully stocked. It runs completely underground. And you can see they've been hauling tons of military equipment.
That's why I keep telling y'all, we at the apex of a seculum of a cycle. Every 80 years, there's a crisis that takes place. So there's not a coincidence that all this stuff is happening. Hit that like button, hit that share button, hit that subscribe button, share this video because this video is very important. It's important for those who live on the coastlines of the Pacific Ocean, where you have that volcano that can activate 10,000 earthquakes. I was talking about the big one, you know, almost 2 weeks ago, right? The big one is the earthquake that could be activated by way of sedimentary rock formation and the liquidation of ice caps. When you had the activation of the dynamos in a planet that speeds up the iron to where it activates a volcano, right? Because it basically denotes the fact that the planet is heating up, speeding up in vibration, right? So it makes it more highly magnetic. So they prepare for something, right?
You know, they're Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah. 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 Well, I appreciate it. I heard there's water supply, food supply, everything's in there. Yeah, unbelievable.
You don't get no cell phone service.
No. Peace, brother. I mean, basically, you got an underground roadway system here that runs all the way to Maine, to Washington, D.C., to Colorado. It's fully stocked. It runs completely underground. And you can see they've been hauling tons of military equipment. You know, they're stocking all these bases. Now, the other thing is the railroad system here is also very strategic. They're bringing in boxcar loads and they're dump shipping here, and they can really deliver to all these locations, which these locations go all the way to Area 51. These locations go all the way to Washington.
You can't hear him. He said all these locations in these tunnel systems go all the way to Colorado, Area 51, and it goes all the way to Washington, D.C. That's connected to those tunnel systems of the Capitol when that guy he showed underneath the ground inside the Capitol building, right? Not a coincidence, ladies and gentlemen. Hit that like button, hit that share button, share this video, ladies and gentlemen. This is one of those videos because, like I said, things are starting to ramp up. It's starting to ramp up. It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up.
In D.C., there's access underneath the White House to this location, okay? So, go all the way to Area 51. These locations go all the way to Washington, D.C. There's access underneath the White House to this location, okay? So, this is a strategic location, which is really the new command center for the Illuminati and the United States government. Well, forget the United States government. This is a headquarters for the Illuminati. This is where they'll ship most of their supplies. When they go underground, they can stay underground for quite some time. And this is stocked with food, water, everything they need. It's an underground.
No, they ass is stocking up because you just seen that big ass Sam's truck. So, they stocking up. You know what I'm saying? They prepare for something.
City. So this is the north entrance, and we're going to go see if we can do some more digging.
So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, you can't make this up. We in that time period right now. We are in that time period where something is going to take place. So I got, okay, the AI warning. That's the only video left. All right, we're going to get back to the presentation. So you got underground tunnel systems that's connected to the Antarctic Treaty System, an international covenant to make a pact with international powers to have these underground network systems from Antarctica, Washington, D.C., all the way to Switzerland. You know what I'm saying? It's a global empire. It's a global infrastructure to prepare for this event that's going to be taking place every 80 years, right? So it's not a coincidence that Tucker Carlson is connected to the Pilgrim Society, and they are the ones who created the Doomsday Manifesto that's connected to these underground bunker systems. Now, one thing you got to understand about this facilitation process of the age of the dark matter, because Donald Trump is the personification of a chaos agent, and Elon Musk is a personification of a technocratic guru. So they want to create a technocratic system that's based on the masters of innovation and control to shape humanity's future by way of technology, artificial intelligence, and power. That's how they basically doing that. So it's a form of technocratic sorcery with dark enlightenment that's connected to it, right? So Trump's inner circle are acolytes of the Curtis of Yarvin's ideology of the dark enlightenment, Elon Musk, J.D. Vance, and many others. Other key players that's connected to the black magicians in the occult, in terms who manipulates hidden forces by way of technology, influence, and mass consciousness by way of the Neuralink. I already broke that down when you're talking about artificial intelligence and Neuralink, because they created Neuralink because they don't have neuromelanin, right? That's why they got to hide in these cave systems, because the cursed seed is the Canaanite. The Canaanite has sulfur in its genetic format. When you have sulfur, you can't activate neuromelanin because you have eumelanin, which is a eukaryotic cell, because you have spliced DNA. That's why everything as far as like the Canaanite in the inception of time, when you're talking about the black Colochians before they were genetically spliced down into a lighter pigmentation, what happened was, they know that their genetics, as far as like 6 ether genetical properties, they dissipate into nothingness, right? You just have a spirit, not a soul. So in order to preserve the vessel of the spirit, you got to go in these cave systems. That's why they're afraid, because they don't have a hereafter. In order to have a hereafter, you got to have a soul. You got to have the energetic frequency of the soul, right? Everybody don't have a soul, right? Everybody don't have internal monologue. Everybody's not the same. That's why they built their system that's based on a synthetic ideology. Everything they build is not real because they not real people. They not real people because they ain't got no damn soul. And yet y'all still following, and showing credence to these people who are basically cursed, right? Following their ways, right? So neurologically, it ain't that you just you a devil just by proxy by following what they follow and believing in what they believe in, right? So eventually all life on earth will be destroyed by the sun. The sun is gradually expanding, and so do we. So we do at some point need to be a multi-planet civilization, because Earth will be incinerated during that process, right? So Earth will be incinerated by way of the expansion of the sun, right? Because energy expands and returns to itself. So when it returns to itself, it operates by way of chaos, which is dark matter energy that is being facilitated by the black sun that works in harmony with the dualistic energies of the sun and the moon that's tether connected to the star Polaris. The star Polaris is basically like the manufacturer of the coronal mass ejections that's hitting the sun and then refracting a light, bouncing off and hitting the moon, and they both work in synergy to activate the black sun. That's what's going on, right? As above, so below. So this is why Donald Trump wants to build the Golden Dome. Now, like I told you, it operates under a Hegelian dialectic principle because they try to say the reason why is because of North Korea, and you got the space-based infrared system triggered, and then you have United States early warning of siren sounds, nuclear retaliation, Russia joins attack, Golden Dome activates, satellite missiles launch, threat intercepted. So this is what they want to create it for. But like I said, you cannot, first of all, you can't create a synthetic dome during the process of the time that we're living in the solar cycle, because it's going to manipulate all forms of technology. That Golden Dome is going to be a form of technology, right? So like I said, I think I said it in maybe 3 videos ago. I said that there's a dome over the United States, not just a dome over, a firmament over the planet. There's a firmament specifically over the geographical landmass of America. That's why everything is so different here, right? The food is worse than other places on the planet. So this means that they can put you in an extensive quarantine zone when they put a dome over America while there's a dome over the planet. What do you think that's going to do to all technological devices, right? Because what happens is when the sun expands even more and you try to block it off with artificial intelligence and technology, it's going to manipulate the technology. And for those who have the Neuralink in their genetic format, what happens is you're going to collapse when the grid goes down, because you have all these metals in your physiology, right? That creates all these parasitical entities called the Toxoplasma gondii that travels up the endocrine system, and the parasite attaches itself to the reptilian cortex of the brain, and these metals that you have in your body is being tether connected to the moon. That's why they call it the silver cord, the silver key. So there's a tethering system of parasites and artificial intelligence and technology that's hooking you up to the moon in the form of a soul trap. That's why I say it doesn't matter what religion you follow, because artificial intelligence is a cult. It's a technocratic form of sorcery, which is basically going to be the embodiment of the new religion, right? So when the system falls, the grid goes down, airplanes go down, people get unalive because they got too many metals in their body. Get chlorophyll to extract the metals. Then you got more airlines cancel flights and reroute around Pakistan's airspace, because you're having all this stuff going on, all this war and things of that nature, right? And then you got, it says Fairweather hydrogen planet. NASA scientists predict Earth's atmosphere will lose its ability to sustain life. Photosynthesis will collapse the CO2 as CO2 declines. Hold on, I think I got another video for you guys, just to make sure. Don't want to get too far. Hit that share button, hit that subscribe button, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. So now we're talking about that. We're going to get into the AI warning here in a second. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you this video once we get to the Pope. Because everybody needs some clarity on that. And then, like I said, I told you, Donald Trump is a white hat. He's the personification of false light, and false light is where you activate chaos. So he's shaking shit up by way of the so-called reset to where he can create this fake golden age under a technocratic system. So breaking, President Trump's 2026 budget proposal would effectively dismantle the Section 8 program, right? That's going to cause chaos, right? Even though you're supposed to be using Section 8 and, incentives from the government, you're supposed to be using it for transitional purposes. You're not supposed to be on it for the rest of your life. But when you make people codependent to the system, right, psychologically, they're not going to understand and know how to take it when you take it away from them. So that's going to cause chaos in itself. right? The reset is going to cause a lot of, chaos and calamity because people still got to eat. People still got to eat, and some people tired of working. So they're going to start stealing shit. So Donald Trump, I broke this down the other day in simple gematria. Donald Trump is equated to 88, and the Pope passed at 88, and now we have an American Pope. And an American Pope is born 88 months exactly after Israel founded in 1948. Not a coincidence, because the universe is mathematical. So since the universe is mathematical, everything that's connected to the gematria system is connected to the binary code system of their numerological system as far as like what's going to be taking place as far as like future events, right? That's why when you look up certain gematria numbers, it's connected to what's going to be taking place in the future, right? I already broke that down when I was talking about the collapse of the Golden Gate Bridge, right? So Robert Francis, elected as Pope Leo the 14th, the Golden Gate Bridge collapse coming soon, right? Because I told you that 88 is the personification of keys. Those are the two keys that goes back to the galactic center. When you at the galactic center, that's when you have fifth dimensional energies hitting the planet and manipulating third density, right? That's called chaos or creation, which is basically personification of Alpha and Omega, beginning and end. It started with creation, but the end of the creation starts by way of chaos and calamity, right? So that's why I said Golden Gate Bridge collapse. And the Golden Gate Bridge is in the Pacific area when you're talking about the underground volcano over in Oregon, right? And it can activate 10,000 earthquakes. So this Golden Gate Bridge collapse can be, activated by way of an earthquake or, the volcanic eruptions. There's a multitude of things that's going to be taking place, and we have to be prepared for it, right? So this is also not a coincidence, right? Because even though rapping and stuff like that is not, it doesn't have too much credence nowadays because the movie and the music industry is starting to phase out. But you cannot negate this alignment because everything that they do in this system operates by way of ritualistic energies. The new Pope is Leo the 14th. Tory Lanez is a Leo, and he was stabbed 14 times. Not a coincidence, right? Because Tory Lanez, he was actually going to be the sacrifice for Jay-Z and Diddy. Because as you have the fall of the church, you also have the fall of Hollywood, right? And the fall of the music industry, which basically is a representation of the fall of the corporate system. So Jay-Z needs a sacrifice. Meg needs a sacrifice. And the reason they need a sacrifice is because they're trying to eliminate those who are operating from a place of independency. Just like Ibrahim of Burkina Faso. He's independent. He has his own autonomous nation. Tory Lanez was independent. So they come anytime that you're independent doing anything and you cut out the middleman, they're going to come after your ass every time. Right? From Tory Lanez to Michael Jackson to Malcolm X to Ibrahim Toure to all these people, all these key players that had authenticity to the point where they didn't need the system, to the point they didn't need the westernized jurisdiction over them. That's when they either unalive you or they gonna lock you up every time, right? Because they understand that these people have the ability to shift the narrative. So Pope Leo the 14th. So now we're going to get into the nationality aspect of it because one thing you got to understand about, the whole mythology and everything behind the Black nobility. A lot of the Black nobility, a lot of them are actually mulattoes, right? Due to the infiltration process when you're talking about, mixing in with bloodlines to by way of colonialism and imperialism. So Pope Leo the 14th, they say that he has Creole and Haitian background, right? From his maternal grandparents. So that means that essentially he's technically a so-called black person by way of the great debauchery when you got the one drop of black blood, right? So he's technically a mulatto, but he doesn't identify as black because he's actually a blackamoor. A blackamoor identifies as a white person, a natural white person. A natural white person means that you have a nationality. So he's still, even though he doesn't identify as black, he's still a so-called black on the surface. He's one of those white passing so-called blacks, but he just doesn't want to identify as such. But that doesn't mean that he's not what he is. You get what I'm saying? Because you got some people who identify as a cat. That don't mean that they ass is a cat. So just because he doesn't identify with his Haitian and Creole background doesn't mean that he's not what he truly is, right? And so even from that standpoint, you still have another pope, because when you live in a dualistic paradox, they make two of everything. So just when you have a European version of Pope Leo XIV, you have a black nobility African Pope Leo XIV, who was controlling the Europeanized Pope Leo XIV behind the scenes while they pushed the Europeanized version out in the surface, right? I already broke that down in the black nobility video, right? So it's not a coincidence. You got certain key players in the background who's given the knowledge to the ones that you see on TV, right? Can't make this up. So you got the genealogist, Jari Christopher, just shared that the Pope Robert Francis Prevost descends from his Louisiana Creole grandmother, Louise Bequet, born New Orleans, 1868, and Haitian ancestry through his grandfather, Joseph Martinez. African history is the history of all mankind. So other than that, and then it says receipts below, grandfather's birth record, grandparents' marriage record. So I got all those documents right here. This is the family tree right here, the landscape of the family tree. So if you will, take a screenshot of it so you can get, because it's not really clear. I found these off Reddit, so this is the closest thing that I can get. And then you got the documents right here. Can't make this up, ladies and gentlemen. This is the birth and marriage records of his grandparents for the parish of Orleans. And now, now the reason why this is all connected to the Vatican popes of Rome is that, as you have the fall of a system, as you have the fall of enterprises and corporation that's connected to the pontification period that's acclimated to the Vatican popes of Rome and their corporate infrastructure, when you have the fall of that whole, that autonomous energy, when you have the fall of it, that means that you're going to have the rising back of the matriarch, right? So this is actually a mockery. Now, they telling you what time it is on the planet. They telling you that the matriarch is back and the indigenous people. That's why they putting all these statues up all over the planet. This is nothing but symbolism, but it's symbolism in the form of mockery. It's basically a gift and a curse. They telling you to get the land back, because I told you, the Pope, who he basically owns, the Vatican popes of Rome, they own 177 billion acres of land where they build their churches, hospitals, corporations, government buildings, schools. They built all that acres of land internationally. They built all that on top of the matriarch. So since you have the fall of the church, that basically rises up the matriarch. So this is why they're putting out the statues. But it's a form of mockery. It's kind of like the same process of, like, you ever seen a person that owed you money and they get mad at your ass because they got to pay you back? Like it ain't your money. So this is their way of showing credence to you and be like, here, take your land back type shit. This is what they basically displaying. They mad that they got to give the land back. They mad that, they lost the game. But it's one of those things where a lot of our people don't understand what's going on, which is why a lot of us is still working. Because I guarantee it, if everybody stopped working right now, the whole system would collapse. Because, like I said, they don't understand that we're going through a shifting process, right? We at the end of the 6,000 years. They said the devil in the book of Revelations, it talks about he has a 6,000 year dominion over the planet, right? And the 6,000 years is up. So the 6,000 years being up is equated to the patriarchy, the patriarchal energy of a patrilineal system being up. It's the end of patriarchy. The end of patriarchy is the end of the devil's reign. That's what that is. So you got the rise of Big Mama coming back. But like I said, they trying to give you this generic looking, black woman. But like I said, they want to give off this perception that y'all overweight and stuff like that. When really, like I said, we was the ones that, that gave them the edification on how to be civil and clean up, right? But this is what they think of you. But they just doing it in the form of mockery because they got to get a land back. They know that they lost the game. So that's what this is all about. They telling you that the matriarch is here, but they trying to mock you. That's all that is. That's why they putting all these statues out. Now, I keep showing reverence to this process of the solar eclipses that took place from 2017, 2023, and 2024. Now, one thing you got to understand now, I was telling you guys how this is all, esoterically connected to artificial intelligence. Because when you look at the nomenclature title of AI, A is the first letter of the alphabet. I is the ninth letter of the alphabet. So that's basically equated to 19. 19 is the personification of the Alpha and the Tav, which is the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Blessed are those to do his commandments. So that means that when you see this ancient Alpha symbol and this Tav symbol that's connected to the solar eclipses, that basically means that it's the beginning and the end of something. Alpha and Omega, which is the 19, which is artificial intelligence. So that means that the ley line energetic grid system that controls all technological devices is going to be shut down by artificial intelligence. So that means that artificial intelligence is going to be the ones that's going to cause the reset, right? So 1 and 9 equals, 1 and 9 is personification of Alpha and Omega, right? Alpha and Omega is 19. 19 is AI. So that all correlates to the sign of judgment, right? Because the 19 is a sign of judgment. The 19 is the Alpha and the Tav, the beginning and end, creation and chaos, right? That's how you balance out the energies of nature by way of the 42 laws of Ma'at. Ma'at is balance, and balance is reset. And it's being reset by judgment, right? And the judgment takes place when you have the calamity that's connected to the seculum of a cycle. Remember, I was telling you, every 80 years, there's a crisis that takes place, right? Whether it's a civil war, a world war, an earthquake, an EMP attack, 10 days of darkness, whatever. Not a coincidence that all this, all my receipts basically lined up. So now we finna finish out the presentation. And then, so you also had an earthquake in Tennessee, earthquake rattles North Georgia and Metro Atlanta, right? The vibrational frequency of planet Earth is starting to speed up. And, speaking on Atlanta, this is one of the announcements that I had. I'm going to be in Atlanta on June 28th. June 28th in Atlanta, we're doing an excavation and a retreat on Stone Mountain, Georgia. So it's going to be a lot of key players there. I think Sister Myra Moss is going to be there. Mama T. I think Vicky Diller is going to be there. 19 Keys, Billy Carson, Sharif El Bay, Q Reeves, Red and Blue Pill, and some other people. King Simon, Black Magic. We all going to be in Stone Mountain. I think Dr. B. Serious is going to be there too. So, and it's a free event. We all doing an excavation. So, like I said, when you got all that damn energy, the galvanization of the 144,000, just a fraction of that energy there, and you get all those people going up in that mountain, what you think it's going to do to the ethers during that time period? We're going to leave an energetic imprint on the ethers, right? There's going to be a certain energy there that's going to uplift the vibrational frequency of planet Earth, right? that's going to eradicate the illusionary aspect of everything that they basically created by way of imperialism. Their imperialistic corporate infrastructure has to fall. It's prophesized, right? So when everybody going up to this excavation, it's going to be a lot of energy there, right? Especially because, like I said, it's right after the summer solstice too, so the sun going to be beaming. It's going to be beaming hot, so wear something comfortable, and make sure you have some some canteens when you come. So Atlanta, Georgia, June 28th. And I got something coming with Yaki on June 2nd. When I go to St. Louis, we doing an in-person podcast. Now, this is also connected to the movie The Last of Us. It's a TV series out on HBO Max. Like I said, we at the apex of a seculum of a cycle. Every 80 years, there's a crisis. So it could be connected to this as well. The perception of art imitates reality. Researcher comes across a tarantula infected by cordyceps from The Last of Us, right? Not a coincidence, because what is a cordyceps? A cordyceps is a parasite. A parasite has the ability to take over your neurological faculties. It can slow down the neural synapses and attach itself to your energetic morphic field because it's feeding on the reptilian cortex. So that's why when you see shapeshifters, that's because their reptilian cortex of the brain that's connected to the cerebrum is being manipulated, right? It's being manipulated by way of a parasite to where they're not in control anymore, because now they're connected to the silver key of the moon, right? So, and it also could put you in a state of zombification. Zombification takes place when you have the two frontal lobes of the brain dematerialize, and it basically puts a strain on the hypothalamus gland. When you have a strain on the hypothalamus gland, that gives you the propensity to bite. It gives you the propensity to attack, right? Because the hypothalamus gland is connected to the endocrine system. The endocrine system is how you get your chakra system in alignment. So the cordyceps that's infecting tarantulas and these things in the movie is basically throwing you off balance spiritually, because your vessel is being hijacked by archonic forces who are basically controlling these parasites that are going inside your body, who are the cordyceps, ladies and gentlemen. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And I'm gonna give a brief synopsis. I'm gonna go a real quick rundown of everything that I just did. Now, the 80-year theory is basically the personification of the fact that there's a global turning point that takes place and it operates on seculums. And the seculum is connected to the biological lifespan of a human on the planet, which is equated to 80 years. That's the average lifespan. And after every 80 years, there's a crisis that takes place, whether it's an earthquake, EMP, a world war, civil war, whatever the case may be, economic crash. It's all connected to a seculum of a cycle because it's connected to the precessional circle that is also working in synergy with the cosmic clock. So they telling you right here, I told you I put out this video 12 days ago, the big one. Now they talking about there's an earthquake. 10,000 earthquakes can be activated by an Oregon coast underground underwater volcano, right? And it goes into the dynamics of the fourth turning, and then I go into how Ibrahim Burkina Faso, him eliminating Western control to where they don't have jurisdiction over his, governmental system, to where he doesn't want to be a part of the international forum of globalization. That's going to manipulate the economic infrastructure, which leads to the stock market can basically crash. But that's because, like I said, he's being a warrior. He's like, hey, I ain't rolling with that New World Order stuff. I ain't trying to be a part of this technocratic system. I want to have my own sovereign nation outside of, globalism. That's what he's basically demonstrating. He's not conforming to the system. He's bucking up against the beast. And that's going to it could potentially cause an economic crash. It's one of those things, it's a catch-22. Whether if, these African powers, if they conform, you still going to have an economic crisis because you still got to have a reset regardless. The system has to reset regardless, whether if they conform or not. But more power to that brother because, you know, all the things that happen in history, you know, colonization, sometimes you just got to be, you know, one that, you know, stand tough and poke your chest out. And then you, like I said, World War III in American soil, potentially. Then we go into the underground military bases that's connected to the Antarctic Treaty System, which is an international covenant to these underground military bunker systems, right? And we talk about the Golden Dome, the manipulation of the atmosphere. We go into the esoteric aspects of the Pope and what it means. So like I said, and plus, the corporation started with a black pope and it has to end with a black pope. But like I said, just because he doesn't identify as such doesn't mean that he's not so-called that, right? So technically I was still right, but I'm still right anyway because you do have another Leo, Pope Leo, who was a cardinal controlling the Europeanized version of Pope Leo XIV. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, it's imperative, you know, to get in alignment. I put out a video, you know, telling people on, you know, giving them the clarification they need to be in alignment as far as like, you know, jumping into tunnel vision, because tunnel vision in itself is a portal. It's a portal of focus. It's a portal of focus to where you basically detach from distractions. So the video I put out last week, you have to use it as a, you know, as a metaphysical blueprint to level up spiritually, mentally, and physically, and financially, because you're going to need these resources when the system falls, right? You got to have your health in order. Are you mentally, are you psychologically capable of understanding everything intuitively as far as like signs and symbols, you know, comprehension, right? You got to be right mentally, physically, spiritually, because when all this shit goes down, a lot of people psychologically, they you know what I'm saying, they're not going to be able to take it. They're not going to be able to take it, right? Because all this time, their perception was connected to the fact that, oh, it was just conspiracy. Now the conspiracy theories are starting to come true. And I demonstrated that ideology all throughout my video. And I was showing you receipts that lined up with the video, you know what I'm saying, to show people clarity on that. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, me and Yaki, we got something going on June 2nd. And then I'm potentially going to be at the Quantum Fest in Houston. And then the next week after that, we got the Stone Mountain, Georgia retreat on Stone Mountain in Atlanta on June 28th. And then I'm still waiting on the dates for the Knowledge Fest. And then I have some other stuff in the works. And yeah, catch me on King Simon's channel Wednesday night at 9 p.m. He's going to do an interview with me, and we're going to be breaking down some information and things of that nature. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching this video. End of transmission.